Thank you everyone for having me. And I think when you gave me this verse to prepare for, I actually didn't know where to go with it. But when I read it, the first part I saw said, "My son, give me my heart, and let your eyes observe my ways." I had a lot of questions that I think came into my mind about the first part of the verse. "My son, give me my heart, give me your heart." And I think the questions that came into my mind were, what is the heart? What does he mean by the heart? If I give the Lord my heart, what is he going to do with it? And how is it that we give the Lord our heart? And finally, how does this apply to our time here in the feast in the fast of the Blessed Virgin Mary? So these were the questions that were kind of running in my mind. And so what I want to start off with is, what is the heart? So the heart in the Old Testament is cited over 800 times in the Old Testament. And you probably cannot find a word more commonly used outside of maybe the or a or any article, but the word heart itself is cited 800 times. And broadly, it speaks to something about the hidden and the inaccessible, or the parts that you can't access, core of something. So we say the phrase, the heart of the sea, or meaning to say in the depths of the sea, kind of inaccessible, unable to get to. Or we say the heart of heaven, maybe to indicate the unattainable heights of heaven. But when we say heart with a person, we mean the core of the human person. Now, sometimes it's physical, in it's referencing something physical. So in 2 Samuel 18:14, it talks about Joab, who is the commander of David's army. And he goes to Absalom and takes 3 darts, and it says it took 3 darts in his hand and thrust them through the heart of Absalom. It's clear what the heart is there. He means the physical heart in your chest. Sometimes, though, it's used as a way to speak to the seat of what is the psychic, or what's the emotional or the spiritual core of the person. So same, focusing with Absalom, in 2 Samuel 15:6, it says, Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. So in that, it's not he's physically stealing their hearts, but he's taking something about capturing their emotional, psychological, spiritual parts of themselves, capturing their attention on him. And sometimes the Bible will do something in between these two extremes, between a physical heart versus it being something a bit more relating to something a bit more greater than the physical, beyond the physical, as in what we say by the emotional or spiritual or psychological. So kind of, again, to remain with David, in 1 Samuel 24:5, it says, David sneaks up on Saul and cuts off the fringe of his robe. But David is very upset about this. And it says, David's heart smote him, or scolded him, because he had cut off Saul's skirt. Because David had made an agreement with himself that he wouldn't harm Saul. And so the heart here is an organ of kind of understanding, an organ of feeling, but it's also something physical, something that physically makes him feel guilty, contrite, and David almost feels like a physical blow, like the heart actually did something to him. It smote him. It scolded him. Another example. Again, sticking with David. Um, Abigail is someone we talked about in 1 Samuel, and she says Abigail returns from home after kind of making an elaborate gift of David against the wishes of her husband Nabal or Nabal. And it says about Nabal's heart was merry with him. Maybe it's Nabil. Maybe it's another way of saying it. Nabal's heart was merry with him, for he was very drunken. Wherefore she told him nothing until the morning light. But it came to pass in the morning, when the wine was gone out of Nabal, and his wife had told him these things, that his heart died within him and became as stone. Here again, the heart is used. I know I haven't spoken too much of the context just because of the time, but here again, the heart is used as a kind of a subject of joy, merriment, like an emotional state. But then it goes through a physical process of dying. So sometimes the Bible will take this kind of physical kind of avenue with the heart. Sometimes it will take a more emotional, psychic, spiritual avenue of the heart. And sometimes it's just physical, sometimes it's just speaking to the emotional and spiritual core. And maybe to expand more on this, the heart. So the heart is described as in emotional or thinking terms. You know, we hear of the hard heart, or the broken heart, or the heart that's hot, or the trembling heart, or the heart that's enlarged. So what I want to stress is that the heart is the deep part of you and unknown to you as an individual, even though it's inside of you. And because it's deep and it's hard to know, the Bible tells us something very important, that it's only God who knows that heart of yours, which is a kind of paradoxical thing, that it's something deep about you and yet you don't know it. You know, Jeremiah says in chapter 17, verse 9 through 10, he says, "The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it?" And what's interesting is, if you pay, I think a lot of people know this verse. Does anyone know what he says after that? After that, I mean, I know you're all on your computer, so I guess you could look. But does anyone know what he says after that? Okay, I'll take this as a non-interactive, not too much interaction. But what he says after that is, he says, "I, the Lord, search the heart. I try the reins, even to give every man according to his ways and according to the fruit of his doing." So the verse starts off saying, who knows the heart? The heart is deceitful above all things. Who can know it? And then he gives the answer as to who knows it. He says, "I, the Lord, search the heart. I try the reins, even to give every man according to his ways and according to the fruit of his doing." So like I said, because it's so deep and so hard to know, it only really can be fully known by God. And like I said, the heart is a mystery to other people, a mystery to themselves. Another verse that puts this again. People in Isaiah on chapter 29, verse 13, he says, people, the Israelites, God is complaining about the Israelites, and he says, draw near, they draw near with their mouth. He's talking about the Israelites. They draw near with their mouth, and with their lips do honor me, but they have removed their heart far from me. You know, and he's not saying exactly that the Israelites are hypocrites. What he's trying to say is that despite their words and what they think they're doing, they're far removed from him in the deepest core of what they are. I don't know if everyone's following me at that. Okay. So it's not that he's, yeah, go ahead.
We're following, John, don't worry.
Okay.
But today we don't have many of our youth, maybe because they are out of town or whatsoever.
No worries.
I encourage everyone to ask questions or give comments.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, if anyone wants to ask a question, I just want to leave a moment. Okay. So, like I said, his complaint is not precisely that the Israelites are hypocrites, but what he's trying to say is that they think they're doing something, but they're far removed from him at their deepest level. Again, this example of how deep it is to the individual and how it's really not known to the individual, that the heart is a mystery to every individual, is illustrated again with Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. Daniel is supposed to interpret the dream. And the verse says that Daniel is supposed to interpret so that Nebuchadnezzar mightest know that the thoughts of thy heart. Essentially to say, he's interpreting the dream so he can know something about himself that lies within his heart that he doesn't know. So I want to kind of transition into making a distinction between the way we talk about the heart in society today and the way the Bible talks about the heart. We know that in society today, the heart is really associated with emotions. We'll say to someone they have a big heart, or they have a bleeding heart, or a heavy heart. All these to kind of communicate something about their emotional states. But for the Bible, the heart is a kind of stand-in for both for emotions, for the will, for wishes, for desires. It kind of is a stand-in for really a whole multitude of things. And because it's a stand-in for these things, another way of understanding the heart is that it's a receptor or an antenna for the things that God sends our way. And just as I don't know if people don't know anything about satellite, but when my mom had ART and all this Egyptian channels that she got when she was at home, what she would have to do, the satellite had to be in this right position in order to receive wherever the signal it was going to get from outer space, so that it can make sure she can have her Temsaleas that she was going to watch, and so the antenna has to be ordered in the right way. It has to be put in the right place or organized in the right place. And so the heart is a receptor, but for it to receive God, it has to be in the right order. It has to be ordered in the right way. It has to be put in the right way. And maybe this is what God means when he says, I will give them a heart to know me. It's a way to say, I will give him a heart that will be rightly ordered, that will know him in a direct and personal way by obeying his commandments. This idea of the receptor, also we hear it when we see in the Bible. It says in the Psalms, it will say, enlarge my heart. Enlarge my heart, meaning make my heart bigger so I can receive you. Incline my heart, it says, to your testimonies. Meaning put my heart closer, incline my heart, order it, put the antenna in the right position so that it receives your testimonies, your commandments. So the heart is a kind of place to be, is a receptacle to be receptive to God and to be responsive to God. And sometimes what God is saying is, in Ezekiel, for example, Ezekiel 11:9, he says, I will exchange their heart of stone for a heart of flesh. meaning to say, I'm going to take their heart that was non-responsive, a heart of stone, that wasn't really a receptor, wasn't really taking in anything, was kind of untouchable, to a heart of flesh. I don't know if there's any questions thus far. It's nice to see you, Joy. Okay. And it says, I will take the stony heart out of their flesh and will give them, and I will give them a heart of flesh. It says that, and the verse follows up by saying that they may walk in my statutes, keep my ordinances and do them, and they shall be my people, and they will be their God. So the receptor, the heart is changed from stony to flesh, so that it can receive his commandments. We can receive his commandments and walk in his statutes, walk in his ordinances, and do them. The one last point I want to make about the heart, because I know I've talked a lot about defining it, but the one thing I want to say is that the heart sometimes also is described in the Bible as a power that kind of builds up from within and compels us to do certain things. So Jeremiah, in Jeremiah 27, he says, Jeremiah has been made fun of for all the prophecies that he made. And he kind of gets fed up with God. And he kind of blames God, essentially, for basically all the blame that he received and all the things that he kind of, all the issues that he kind of faced as being a prophet. And he says to him, O Lord, thou hast deceived me, and I was deceived. Thou art stronger than I, and hast prevailed. I am in derision or sadness all day. Everyone mocks me. And then he kind of adds that he's resolved to speak God's word no more, that he's not going to say God's word anymore. But he says the word wouldn't allow it. Then I said, I will not make mention of him, nor speak any more of his name. But his word was in my heart as a burning fire shut up in my bones. And I could not stay, refrain from speaking. I could not stay and not speak. His word was in my heart as a burning fire shut up in my bones. The heart is here not only as a metaphor for the kind of deepest level of his being, it's also a kind of physical organ that pushes Jeremiah's mind to say something that he wishes he could not say, but he has to say it. This is kind of alluded to in the road to Emmaus, where the two disciples are walking with Christ, and after Christ breaks the bread, opens the scripture. After he does these things, Christ no longer disappears. Which, as a side note, what the disciples had available to them to know about God was in the breaking of bread and the opening of scriptures. Meaning to say, once he broke the bread and once he opened the scriptures, he disappeared. He was no longer there. It was just them. Which is to say that the breaking of the bread and opening of the scriptures is suffice to bring the presence of Christ in our midst. So what was available to the disciples at the time is available to us today. Is everyone following me this far? Okay.
Let me ask one basic question, John,
Mm-hmm.
that may be asked by so many people, especially the youth.
Mm-hmm.
My son, give me your heart.
Mm-hmm.
I already love the Lord from all my heart. I love God from all my heart. However,
mm-hmm.
I commit sin. I fall several times. I find it hard to pray regularly. I find it hard to spend more time on the Bible.
Mhm.
Is it true that I love the Lord or not? How do I know that I love the Lord from all my heart? How can I give him my heart? Do you have
Yeah.
any steps, like prescription, what to do? What to do in order to give the Lord my heart?
I may address this a bit to a degree, but I mean, just to quickly answer to what you said, Abuna, you know, what it means to give it heart is a process. It's not just I'm not giving it and now I've given it. It's really there's a process of giving, and it's a process of how much you're giving. So, you know, this idea of an individual who's sinning but also praying. Well, I would say that that person is in the process of giving their heart to God, that they're praying and perhaps repenting and working on their sinful side, and yet they're still and they're still sinning, but they're working. There's a process going on, and I want to make sure that, you know, when God asks us to give His heart, He's not saying, "Now give me my heart, give me your heart in a moment," as though to say that you could just do it in 1 minute and that's the end of it. It's certainly not the end of it. The reality of it is that we give our hearts throughout the process of our whole life. And I think sometimes we feel that we don't appreciate this process.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is another way of understanding this is to say, you know, you'll hear for some people within a Protestant with a Protestant background, they may say that they are saved. You know, that salvation is one and done. They've already been saved. There's nothing, and the dangers that people will often speak to is, well, if you're saved, then you can do whatever you want. You know, that there's a kind of, it excuses people's behaviors, and it doesn't emphasize enough the behavior and actions of a Christian, that it neglects this side of things. But for someone who's Orthodox, the better, maybe the better statement is to say, I am being saved, meaning I'm in the process of being saved, and that process is not because God hasn't done everything that He can to save me, but that process is about me working, doing my part in working with Him to be saved. It's a statement to just emphasize how much it's not just it's not just on God, and also it's not just on us, that there's
So
a kind of
it's a long
cooperation.
process that may take all our lifetime.
Sure.
Are there any landmarks, any signs that I am on the right way? Any signs that I'm giving my heart to my Lord?
Yeah. Well, this is, you know, so I have to, I mean, one answer and is going to be my what I'm going to say, but I'd say two things. There's a reason why I emphasize this idea that the heart is a mystery to even ourselves. That we have this kind of idea that sometimes we feel like we know what's in our heart, but the reality is that we don't know. We don't know what's in our heart. And the reality is also that God really knows what's in our heart. And so, and you know, it reminds me of a quote. Saint Anthony has a beautiful quote. He says, "To know yourself is to know God." Maybe we could change it for the purpose of this talk. To know your heart is to know God. Well, yeah, I get what your question is. Well, how do you know what you know, what are the ways you can assess whether you know your heart or not? I mean, on one level, there's a verse that says, "Where your treasure is, your heart will be also."